Hello and welcome. I'm Tafra Gadamo. Ethiopia today is the second largest refugee hosting country in the African continent. What does that mean in terms of resources and the ability to cater for their needs? The world observed yet another Refugee Day this week with the key message, hope away from home. My guest, Margaret Atieno, is the Deputy Representative of the UNHCR in Ethiopia. Margaret Atieno, a very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So you are in a country which hosts something like close to 1 million refugees from at least 5 countries?
That's correct. I think Ethiopia today hosts close to 1 million refugees, and the number is growing. Today it is the second largest in the African continent after Uganda in terms of the numbers of refugees. Yes, it is growing. Since the beginning of the year, we've seen close to 100,000 refugees come in, mostly from the Somaliland. We've also seen, most recently, new arrivals from Sudan. So with the two situations, the numbers are growing. With the Sudan situation, the numbers are still quite low. But as we know,
we're talking about how many?
We are talking about, from the Sudan so far, we have recorded about 14,000 individuals who are seeking international protection. About 40,000 people have come through from Sudan since the conflict started, but not all are seeking international protection. So those who are seeking international protection are those who cannot go back. Those would be the Sudanese nationals who cannot go back to Sudan. We've also seen a good number of Eritrean nationals who were formerly refugees in Sudan and now find themselves again displaced a second time because they don't have the option to go back to Eritrea and they cannot remain in the conflict in Sudan. So we've seen that the numbers are growing and our hope is that there will be peace soon in Sudan, and we should not have these numbers coming through. Our projection is that if the situation does not change now, we may end up with close to 80,000 individuals coming to Ethiopia. 80 coming to Ethiopia by the end of the year. There's also Ethiopians who were formerly refugees in Sudan and also now coming back because they have no option. So we're also supporting and working with Ethiopian former refugees who are coming back. Some were really just settled in Sudan, but there were those, especially from around the eastern Sudan area, who had fled in the times of conflict in Ethiopia. So it's a mixed situation, if you may.
So that means you've established new camps? You've created new camps for these refugees? How does it work?
So the policy of the government, and we work very closely with the government's refugee returnee services, is that when refugees, or rather when we have situations like this, then we come together to form an approach of how to assist them. So usually they would grant prima facie, which means from the face of it, refugee status because of the situation across the border. So when that is declared, depending on the numbers, the government has decided to settle them in the form of a settlement, not necessarily a camp. Traditionally, we are used to seeing camps, and that is how Ethiopia has been addressing the refugee situation. But of late, we've seen a change in policy, which is very progressive, which basically says that refugees can settle in an area where they can integrate and share facilities with the local communities. So for the Somali refugee influx, we have established a settlement together with the government's refugee returnee services in a place called Mirkan. Mirkan is in Dolo Zone in Somali region. So the settlement is really an optional village, if you may, where refugees may settle and maybe, just have a life. But
just like the local community.
Just like the local community. The idea is that they share the services with the local community. And then we support those services instead of, a parallel system as what you would have seen in camps where there's a parallel structure parallel to what the government is providing for its nationals. In Mirkan, it is one integrated approach. So what we appeal...
So they source their services from the sources that the local communities tap into. Is that correct?
So what happens is that depending on the numbers, then we seek to expand the services that are available. For example, if there's water systems available for the local population, before arrival of the refugees, there were perhaps 50,000 or so Somali Ethiopians living there. With the additional 50,000, they may need additional 3 more boreholes. There's a school that was already established. With the additional population, they may need a few more classrooms. Similarly, with the health services, with the additional population, they may need to expand, the capacity in the health services in terms of staff, in terms of, the medicine, the drugs, and stuff like that. So we really just work with the government to expand the services that are already established. And I think in most situations, governments also have their local development plans that is, futuristic. In Ethiopia, we have now the 10-year development plan. So we try to see within that plan, how can we support the government to take forward some of those plans while also integrating and including this population. Remember, when this population comes, they also cause a strain on the services. Yes, so I think...
So is this, now that you are on it, let's continue the discussion along that line. So is this a major shift from what it used to be?
This is a major shift in direction for UNHCR globally, for governments globally, on how refugee situations are being managed. I think beginning of, since 2016, governments have agreed to have what we call the comprehensive refugee response, where we work, towards integrating refugees in national systems as opposed to parallel camp systems. And that also recognizes that the refugees and the host are basically one community. So the support that we provide to the refugees is also extended to the host community. So in a place like Mirkan, we work with both refugees and the people who are hosting them, recognizing that there's an impact as well when refugees come into the area.
Where else?
And also, again, also just recognizing that, the refugee situation is not just a humanitarian situation. And we cannot only, respond in a humanitarian manner. It is also a development issue. It requires strengthening of systems. It requires long-term planning. So this type of approach really allows us to work with, a wider group of stakeholders beyond the traditional humanitarian UNHCR actors that have been responding. So we have multitude of actors who have also...
Are you applying this approach in all the refugee camps, in all the locations where the refugees are?
Since 2019, Ethiopia also has come up with a new proclamation, a refugee proclamation, that also expands the rights for refugees, allows them a bit of freedom in terms of, access to work, access to land, education,
start their own business and so on.
Yes. So in line with that, I think we are working towards improving existing systems. So we have situations where refugees are still in camps, but these camps, for example, there are some camps that have been in existence for 30 years, for 20 years. And really, over time, they've become more than just camps. It's a community. It's a city. So we are working together with the government to improve the situation in those camps. So there are two approaches. There's the new arrivals who have just come, and what RRS, our government counterpart, has pronounced, this is the policy by the government, is that they would be settled, as I've explained, in terms of a settlement as opposed to camps. And then the government is also looking at the old camps, those that have been there for many years. We have an example of a camp in Kabarbea, for example, in the Somaliland, Jijiga. It has been in existence for 30 years. You have a population, half the population there were born in Ethiopia. Right. They have integrated socially with the communities around them. They speak the same language. They use the same services. And the government has said, recognizing that they have been here for so long, they have integrated more or less. They are also contributing to the economy where they are. We recently entered into an agreement with the Somali regional government, a memorandum of understanding that will then help us to support Kaberbea not as a camp, but as a growing city. It's actually, the terminology they're using is a city. The camp has grown into the city, and it's really a city. It is not...
Doesn't this kind of approach bring some kind of conflict between the host communities and the refugees?
I have not witnessed any kind of conflict. It's actually the opposite. Because as I said, over time, the communities have integrated socially. They have intermarried, their children born to Ethiopian parents, and vice versa. In most cases as well, the refugees move to areas where they have affiliations, where they feel welcomed. And in the case of Kaberbea and even in American, we see that the host communities are the first ones to respond. They are the first ones to open their homes to the refugees. In fact, in most cases, they would be saying, these are our brothers and sisters. So I would not say there's a conflict. There is a strain in terms of services because they are sharing services, and the services in most cases are not enough. And that's why when we have the document like we have now with the MOU, we are simply saying, this area needs support. This community needs support to be able to cope. So there's a strain because there is the population has grown and the services are not enough. So the responsibility we have, together with the other development actors, is really to support the community to bring in the services that are required to make the community self-reliant.
Refugees from Somaliland, as you've been telling me off camera, is one of the most underreported stories.
Yes.
How so?
So Somaliland, for many years, has been, I would say, a very peaceful area, and it was really unexpected that there would be a conflict in this region. So we have seen conflicts in all other parts of Somalia, but not in Somaliland. So this was really unexpected. And then they are coming into an area that is very, very remote and very, very hard to reach. It is basically 3 hours drive from Gigi. Not 3 hours, sorry, 3 days by road. 3 days to travel by road from the nearest city in Jijiga. So it is, the story is not known to a lot of people. By the fact that it is remote, it is a situation that nobody expected that would happen.
By the latest count, it is, 100,000 of them?
So far, 100,000. The target population since February that has crossed into Ethiopia is 100,000. We did a rapid registration in February, which confirmed that number. And what we are doing now, or rather what the government, Refugee Returnee Services, is doing, is to have them individually registered. In the refugee asylum regime, normally we register the refugees in order to secure their asylum status. So those who have been individually registered is about 30,000, and that registration is ongoing. It's ongoing. But those who have crossed and are scattered within the Woredas are the districts where they're hosted, are about 100,000.
Do you see the figure rising? You anticipate more?
We hope the situation will not go beyond what we have seen now. But yesterday we have seen the news again that the conflict is still prevailing. There is no solution. So hopefully we find a solution to the Lasanod situation. Otherwise, we hope that the numbers will not go beyond what we are seeing now.
You never expected Sudan to come to that level and eventually generating those refugees who crossed the borders, not only to Ethiopia, but in large measure to Chad and South Sudan. You never expected, you never prepared for that. You never were prepared for it. You actually cannot prepare yourself.
We cannot prepare ourselves for conflict, and nobody really...
Any early warnings?
Of course, Sudan has been a bit unstable for the last couple of years, but there have been also efforts at the international level to support them to establish, themselves. But we did not expect this kind of displacement. It is really becoming one of the largest again in the region. The numbers are close to 1 million and growing. People are displaced internally within Sudan. And then externally, we are seeing very large numbers moving into Chad, South Sudan, Egypt. Ethiopia so far has received the list, but there are very big numbers that have crossed into Chad and into Egypt and into South Sudan.
I understand that this week you've been in Asaita to observe the World Refugee Day, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And Asaita is where you have close to 30,000 Eritrean refugees?
Yes, Asaita is again one of the other interesting stories in terms of the refugee integration. It has about 30,000 refugees. The refugees are integrated in the communities. They live side by side with the local communities. They do their businesses. They share services. And I think that is one of the stories that also is not very visible because it's not really talked about. But it's a really good story in terms of the integration of refugees and inclusion of refugees in the national systems and also within the community.
It has been like that for some time, right?
It has been like that for some time. It's an approach that has developed in a way by the local authorities, and it's something that as UNHCR we would like to promote, and we are also calling on other partners to support. It's also hard to reach. It's an area that is hard to reach. It's very dry and remote, but very progressive in terms of the way they have received the refugees.
No, not so for Eritrean refugees in those camps that used to be in Tigray region, right?
The Tigray region had at least 3 camps.
Are they still functional?
There were at least 3 camps, and not anymore.
So because of the war, all these camps are no more?
Because of the war, the camps were sort of dismantled, and the refugees were displaced again. Some of them found their way to Addis, and they were welcomed here. Some of them were settled in a new place in Amhara. The government's refugee returning services established a settlement called Alemwach. It is a settlement. It's not a camp, with the same approach of integrating refugees in national systems. So the refugees were dispersed, but they still remain within Ethiopia, and they have been absorbed in Alemwach settlement, and some of them, quite a good number, found their way to Addis, where they were also registered, and they are, they try to make a living here.
Because they were more or less like a little over 100,000, right, in those camps?
There were quite a big number.
All of them have moved out of that region, of Tigray, or there are also some?
The majority, very few. The information we have is just about maybe a couple of thousands that are settled within the urban areas and who don't want to move further. The government allowed them the freedom to choose where they wanted to go. And the majority chose to move to Alemwach, and some of them chose to, just about 40,000 or so, chose to come to Addis.
Do those refugees have hope, you think?
Hope away from home. I would say yes. I would say yes.
That's the theme for this year, for you,
yes.
World Refugee Day.
And I think for good reason, because as we have said, since 2019 in Ethiopia, we have seen a lot of progress in terms of the policy that allows refugees to regain their dignity and in terms of access to school, access to work. So I think this is the hope that we are talking about. And refugees also bring with them a lot of, I would say, benefits. Sometimes they're seen as a burden, but I would not say they're a burden. They bring with them skills. They bring with them the talents. They bring hope. And that's what we would like for this World Refugee Day to stress. That refugees bring with them hope, and they need the hope. Hope in terms of solutions to their issues. And the solutions can be, as I said, access to schools. The solutions can be allowing them to share services. It can be, long-term, giving them land to till and become self-reliant and not just depend on, on aid. Because they have the talent, they have the capacities. We've seen refugees make, as I said, camps cities. If you go to some of these camps, they're actually really, a lot of opportunities there. And that is the hope that we are trying to stress on.
It's interesting because so much is being done for those refugees that also involves them as partners.
Yes, absolutely.
It's very interesting. So much has been done. But what do you say to those refugees who say, we've been dislocated 3 or 4 times, like you mentioned, from Sudan, Ethiopians, and also Eritreans in Ethiopia and so on? What do you tell to those people who say, well, we had hopes, but our hopes were broken, not once, but twice, 3 times? What do you tell them?
I think we are here to work with them. I think the government is here to work with them. I would say to them that there is hope, there are opportunities. Wherever they settle, wherever they are, they need to make use of the services that are being provided. And I think we are here to work with them. That's what I can say.
The reason why I mentioned is this, because resources are not available, right? Your boss, Filippo Grandi, always says there are new emergencies coming up and they need more resources and so forth. They're not coming as you would want them to.
Absolutely. I did say that we are here to work with them, but definitely without resources, there's not much we can do. We have lots of plans. We have recently concluded a stakeholder exercise where the government has renewed some of the pledges that they would like to take forward for the next 4 years in terms of opening up opportunities for refugees, more refugees to work, opening up these opportunities that we are talking about in terms of integrating refugees, but without resources, without investment. All these opportunities need investments. They need investments, and we do not have that type of investment. And I think we have been calling on governments. The government of Ethiopia has done its part in terms of opening its borders and, in terms of allowing people to come in and providing the foundation through the various policies that we have seen. But all of this requires financial inputs and investments. And that is what we are calling for. Otherwise, we will not be able to realize the hope in many of the refugees. Yes.
Margaret Atieno, again, it was a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.